So somebody thought it was a good idea to put the Flyers and the Sixers on the same night at essentially the same time. The Sixers will kick it off at 7:30. The Flyers will follow up at 8 o'clock. You can listen to the Flyers and the Hurricanes game one on our sister station, Rock 104.1. Kevin Durso will be covering it at Kevin_Durso, 97.3 ESPN.com. Flyers and the Hurricanes. So what happened with this series? Everybody's up in arms. How did we land on 8 o'clock on Saturday night when the Sixers had announced they're going to play at 7:30?
Because the NHL had a time slot that nobody was able to take because none of the game sixes from last night are going to a game seven. So that's a primetime Saturday slot that ABC has for the Stanley Cup playoffs, and they needed a game in there. And this is the series that's ready to go more than any of the others. You just found out last night that Minnesota moved on to play Colorado, so they're not going to throw them in 2 nights later. So you get the Flyers and Hurricanes 3 nights after the Flyers finished off their series.
So the Flyers, how do they take this news? They get the text or the message when that they have to play and get themselves pretty much, I guess they left today.
Yeah, they did leave today. By this point, they should be there already and just kind of taking it in, you're relaxing, getting ready for the next day where they'll have, I assume they'll have morning skate tomorrow and then the game at 8 o'clock. Tonight is a night where you probably focus on trying to find a place to grab a dinner together as a team. Maybe they set that up for where they're staying. I'm not sure about that, but I'm sure that they had at least in their minds, because we talked about yesterday that Keith Jones was at least aware that Saturday was a possibility. So I'm sure they prepared for this, but I don't think they really found out about it until probably just a few hours before everybody else did. Like I'm going to guess that they probably knew about it maybe around the start of the games that were going on. And once it was determined that, I guess it was made public once it was determined that that really wasn't happening, but they probably knew already, hey, if these 2 games go the way, this way, you're in for Saturday.
Well, they're going to play Saturday. By the way, correct me if I'm wrong, the Ottawa series for Carolina, that ended last Saturday, right? They've been sitting around for a week.
Yeah, and that was the thing going into Game 4 of the Flyers-Penguins series was that there was the possibility that both teams were going to sweep their series on the same day and then be waiting for something like this, that they would have to wait upwards of at least a week to play. The Flyers then obviously needed 2 more games before they were able to complete the series. So now they're going to come in without probably the rust factor potentially, but then again, you also look at the way the playoff series go, and you get one team that's had a week to rest up, heal up in any way. They had, Carolina had a couple players that were banged up at the end of the Ottawa series and just had a week off to be able to prepare themselves to get back into game action. So they're anticipating a fully healthy lineup in Game 1, whereas the Flyers may have players who are experiencing things. Doesn't mean they're unavailable, but experiencing things and didn't exactly get a bunch of time off in between these 2 series.
So let's talk a little bit about that. Any lineup changes that you foresee because of a different opponent here?
There's one in particular it looks like might happen, and it's going to be at the forward position. It looks like Alex Bump is going to come back out of the lineup to probably try to throw that 4th line back together. So Garnet Hathaway would come back into the lineup and potentially give that 4th line that physicality. I think that's part of what they're going to try to do to set the tone in the series. One thing that Ottawa did pretty well was play physically, and that's what kind of kept some of those games close, even though Carolina ended up winning the series and sweeping it. The games were all relatively close, and as such, playing a physical brand can, one, keep that competitive nature going because you're definitely adding that element to it. And then Carolina took a lot of penalties in the first round for 4 games. Ottawa had 21 power plays in a 4-game series, but only scored 1 time. So you can see how opportunity may be there, but you also got to execute. So it's one of the big keys for me is if Carolina is going to be giving away penalties like that and taking a lot of penalties to put you on the power play, then you better figure out your power play fast because it's quite possibly the window to being competitive on the scoreboard as opposed to just meeting the physicality or the possession game.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, let's go back to the matchups in this series. Carolina won 4-3 overtime. That was in October. 4-3 in a shootout, December. The very next day, 3-2 in another shootout. And then the April 13th game, Philly won in a shootout. Hurricanes resting a lot of players here. What do we take away from the 4 matchups that on paper, were seemingly all overtime and shootout games.
Yeah, well, I apply that for one because I feel like even if the series doesn't weren't to last many games, it's going to last a lot because I just get the sense that these two are going to play themselves into overtime at least once, maybe twice, maybe more times than that. Honestly, it's the way they've played each other all year. It's really hard to kind of look at some of the past games with this because there's so many different factors about it. You brought up all the guys that sat out for Carolina in the last game that they met in the regular season, and that doesn't really give you a feel for all the newcomers that the Flyers had kind of come back into the lineup that didn't play when these teams met in a back-to-back in December. By that point, Tyson Forrester was hurt. Porter Martone wasn't here. Alex Bump wasn't called up yet. Denver Barkey wasn't called up yet. So there's a lot of players that didn't get the chance to even experience much of this until that second to last game where you clinched the playoff spot. And interesting for me is the goalie matchup in this one. Freddie Anderson's going to be the probable starter because he was throughout the first round for Carolina. So he'll be the probable starter. The Flyers saw him in the second game of the season when they played in October and never saw him again for the rest of the year in the other three matchups against this team. So you're kind of trying to go back to October, if you will, and it's a totally different team for both sides. Everybody's had a chance to work out through the 82 game season to get things right or to get consistency down, to get familiar with each other. You build the lineup the way that you want to for the playoffs, all of that. And it really makes it hard to look at the second game of the season and determine, what can we take from that when you're still really working things out from coming out of training camp to being in playoff mode. It's very different.
So, the last series, what kind of who does this series change the outlook for some of the players?
Yeah, it's tough to say. I mean, both teams are going to have to experience different things. I feel like Ottawa came in with some guys that were, kind of that mix of veterans and young players, but their younger players have already had playoff experience from the year before. They also had probably more star power to them. I don't feel like the Flyers have a player that replicates, Ottawa having Brady Tkachuk, for example. I don't think they've got a guy with that kind of star power just yet. I mean, you think of guys like Martone and Michkov that they could get there eventually, but I don't think they have anybody who's that established like that. And Carolina kind of is a similar team in that sense, where it's not. You're certainly not going up against a Sidney Crosby type player in terms of the reputation and the legacy, but you are going up against players who are very skilled and play as a kind of collective unit. So this really, I know there was a lot of talk about how the Flyers kind of play this boring defensive style through the playoffs. That's what wins in the playoffs for one. And Carolina does the same thing, if not better. So you look at the way that Carolina plays, it's going to be two teams that don't give you a lot, don't give up much, expect a lot of play in the neutral zone. It's the way that these two teams play. So I'd be shocked if we get a high scoring series because it's just not the way these two teams are made up.
Yeah, hence the possibility for a lot of overtime as we
exactly
saw in all their matchups here. And one thing, let's go to Michkov. Do you expect this is a better fit for him?
I think it could be, and it's not going to happen. It's not going to happen a ton, but I do think that there might be potential. They've been able to do it at least in the past. There might be potential to get more rush chances in this series than they did toward the end of the Pittsburgh series. I think that's what partially did him in a little bit when you got to Game 4, eventually out for Game 5. Even in Game 6, it didn't feel like there was a lot of those chances going on. You really had to generate those from speed in the neutral zone. That's not really Michkov's game, so perhaps you can find a way to get him a little bit more activated in that sense. I think that if you can, again, sometimes for special teams time, if you can get a lot of power play time, that could be a way to get guys going. He did, Michkov did score the first goal for the Flyers in that last game against Carolina. So not like he's coming in with no success whatsoever. It doesn't mean he didn't have success previously against Pittsburgh. I just think that there was a different element to it with all the veterans that Pittsburgh had and the way that they were going to play and defend and kind of mark certain guys. It's almost like they kind of focused heavy on Michkov and took him away. And then after the first handful of games when Martone was killing it, it's like, let's pay attention to this guy too, because he's having a great series. And they were eventually able to kind of do the same thing to him. Of course, Michkov comes back into the lineup and probably makes makes one of the big plays. He gets the primary assist on the game-winning goal that moves you on to the second round. So hopefully that motivation sticks, because he came back and looked like a different player in Game 6. And if he can continue to play to that level, then he can have an impact.
obviously, you talked a little bit about the special teams. They basically were perfect against Ottawa on special teams. I mean, what were they, 20 of 21 against
Yeah.
Ottawa? And we know the Flyers don't score a lick. You would have to imagine that that's going to have to change for you to upset a team like Carolina. You have to find a way to finally buck that trend.
Yeah, and for me, it's the volume of penalties that they took. If you're going to give up, that's only a 4-game series. So if you're going to give up upwards of 5 power plays a game and give that many opportunities to a team, you need to at least get 1 goal, if not 2, every single time that happens. Like Game 4 of that series, which ultimately knocks Ottawa out of the playoffs. They were 1 for 9 on the power play. You get 9 power play opportunities and you can't come up with more than 1 goal. You don't deserve to win the game for that. So that's where that comes into play for me, is that those are opportunities. And granted, Carolina it was an outstanding penalty kill team in the regular season. They're aggressive. They get right up in your face. They don't give you a lot of time. So if the Flyers think they're going to pass along the perimeter and get to stand there a little bit and let something develop, think again, you got to keep it moving. But they did have some success in that area down the stretch where they were moving the puck better. That it kind of fizzled out as soon as you got to the playoff mode and the way Pittsburgh played you. But you got to take whatever you can get here and continue to make adjustments, try to be quick thinking and move the puck well, because that's what's going to give you the opportunity on the power play. And you definitely need to cash in. I look at Game 3 of the last series and really think about that, because that was the one game where your power play came through and it was needed. So you do stuff like that, you can get some of these games to go more tilted in your favor. You might have a shot to pull out a win or two because of that, if that's the case.
All right, give me a guy on Carolina that concerns you, that in matchup problems that you would say, yeah, they got him, that's a problem.
Yeah, in most cases, I would probably pick guys off the top line, but I'm going to shift to their second line. Logan Stankoven has been their top scorer from the first round. And you would think that with Carolina's roster, with some of the forwards they have, their top line of Andrei Svechnikov, Sebastian Aho, and Seth Jarvis, that those are the 3 guys that would do the most damage. And those 3 guys definitely know how to do it in their previous matchups against the Flyers. But I look at the way Stankoven has played so far in the playoffs, and you worry about guys who get on hot streaks like that. The way that Martone came in, when Martone scored in both of the first 2 games he played, it's like, well, that's a kid who's riding a hot streak. I don't know how I'm supposed to stop that right away. You're watching him all the time. Stankoven was that guy in round 1 for Carolina, and to me, he's the guy I would watch out for more than anything for now, until somebody else kind of steps forward and takes the reins from him.
Second-year guy. We'll see how it works. Hall, another veteran for them. We'll see how he steps up. You got a young Flyers team. But Tippett banged up a little bit here. We'll see what kind of role he ends up with. Martone kind of slowed down in that first-round series later on in the games against Pittsburgh. Who is the X factor for Philadelphia for you for them to win this series?
I picked Michkov. I think that you need guys like that to get going. If you're going to meet what Carolina does, and as well as they play defensively, then you need skill guys to come through. I don't think it shies away from the other guys we're mentioning, guys like Tippett, Konechny, Zegras. You need all those guys to step up in their own right. But I think that given how the first round went for Michkov, that maybe changing things up. Everybody's talked about clean slates when it comes to moving to another round. He's probably one of the guys who can benefit the most from that. And to me, I'm watching him to be kind of a catalyst from an offensive perspective, because you're certainly not going to be able to win this series. I mean, it would be helpful if you keep getting the goaltending you did in the first round and try to win games 1-0, 2-1 like you did in Game 6. But I don't think you can expect it. You're going to need to score a little bit, and you need guys like Michkov to step up and help in that category.
All right, tomorrow night it's Flyers, and it is the Carolina Hurricanes. First time these two teams have ever met in the playoffs. It'll be Raleigh, 8 o'clock, Rock 104.1, and you can listen live on the Rock 104.1 free mobile app. So we can, I don't know how you configure the television people out there, but I'll let you figure it out for yourself. Maybe put on Tim Saunders on the call and watch the game that way. I don't know, but should be fun. We'll have all the coverage right here on Monday's show. Kevin Durso at Kevin_Durso and on 97.3 ESPN.com. All right, man. Thanks, bud.
You got it. Thanks, Mike.
All right, Kevin Durso, the Flyers tomorrow night.